Before we get started with today's interview, just a quick reminder, click the thumbs up, make sure you subscribe, and ding the bell so that you don't miss any of the great interviews that we have coming up. Now, on to today's interview. Welcome back, everybody. Today, my special guest is composer and music educator Mona Rejino. I am so pleased that you're with us today. Thank you for taking time, Mona.
Oh, I'm excited to be here, Sam. Thank you.
I really am excited to kind of get to know you just a little bit as a composer. So I'd like to talk about your musical background. Did you come from a musical family?
You know, not especially. My mom and dad loved music, and I grew up listening to music all the time in our home. I mean, everything from, a little country and western to Frank Sinatra to soundtracks of, The Sound of Music, Dr. Zhivago, just a little of everything. But they were not taught musicians. But my granddad actually was a musician, and but not taught. He was self-taught. He had a wonderful singing voice and a tenor. He sang in the local quartet in my small hometown in West Texas. He had an old fiddle, and he could, throw out a few tunes on that. He taught himself how to play guitar. So, he really inspired me. I think his passion and love for music inspired me, and I followed along the same path.
That is really, really cool. What are some of your earliest memories of him and making music together?
We would have what we call sing-songs. Now, probably no one has ever heard of that, but it's a thing in Texas. And we would get together every few months at my grandmother's house. So she had a big old Gold Branson upright piano. And so anyone who could play an instrument or sing was welcome to join in. And then we'd have other people who would just sit around in the living room and enjoy the music. And, we would do everything from the old Stamps gospel tunes, I'll Fly Away, Peace in the Valley, those old tunes. And then we would do Shine on Harvest Moon. Just, people would just call out songs. Lean on Me, was a big thing back in the day. And so if there were teenagers there, we would all sing that. And sometimes people would call out songs, and the musicians, we would get together and talk. Well, do you know that? Well, I kind of know the beginning. Well, I kind of know the middle part, And, well, what would be a good key? And we would just figure it out and wing it. And, little did I know at the time what wonderful training that was, for later in life. So, I look back with very fond memories on that.
That is awesome. I love how music was a fun thing. It wasn't so much of a discipline. It's part of the fabric of your family growing up. It's a community for you. There's so many awesome things in that. That is just so cool. So, how did you transition from that very recreational thing into more formal musical training?
My parents, although were not musicians, but they were observant, and I'm so grateful for that. And I always played by ear. So when I was just a little kid, maybe 4 years old, I'd climb up on the big piano bench at my grandmother's house and pick out tunes by ear. And so they found me a piano teacher. And the best piano teacher in my small hometown would not accept students until they were in second grade. So they had to find someone else. And the coach's wife, Mrs. Berry, was a good teacher. And so she started me out, taught me the basics, how to read, And then I moved on to Mrs. Lane in the second grade. And she really gave me an excellent background in music. And, so for me, it was always a mixture of playing by ear and reading and listening, just kind of all of it together. And that's how I still do it.
Oh, that's excellent. And I would hazard a guess that perhaps you are able to kind of synthesize those three things together, and that is what has made you into the composer you are today. What a cool thing. What was the point at which you said, I think that this is more than just a hobby for me, that this is just my passion. This is the thing that I want to kind of turn into my career?
I would say by the time I was 12 or 13 years old, I knew it was going to be music. That was just my thing, just like it's your thing, And I feel very fortunate because, a lot of friends, go off to college. Well, we don't really know what we're going to do. We don't know what we're interested in. And I think it's kind of a gift, when you have an art form that's such a passion that that's going to be your life's path. And I have no regrets.
So how did you start composing?
Truth be told, I was 35 years old before I wrote anything other than what was required in college. And I really had no intention of being a composer. And I was fortunate enough to be on the team at Hal Leonard that created the Hal Leonard Student Piano Library, the student method and the adult method. And it was really just by chance. We were writing the first book, and we needed a couple of songs for the very introduction of reading on the staff. So we wanted a song written in treble clef that used only 3 notes, E, F, and G, and a song written in bass clef that used only 3 notes, F, G, and A. And I was teaching at the time, and I had 2 sisters who were supposed to come for a lesson. And their mother called me, kind of last minute, said, oh, something's come up. We can't make the lesson today. So I realized, I had a babysitter for my kids in the other room, and I had an hour and a half on my hands. And we really needed this. So I just sat down and jotted down a couple of super easy pieces. I thought, well, why not? And I sent them in, and they were accepted. So that gave me a little bit of encouragement to, well, maybe I should pursue this.
And then what are the things that kind of helped you to continue to grow as a composer?
Well, the team that I worked with, Philip Kevrin, who is just the ultimate composer, and Barbara Crater, who was the leader of our team and was always so encouraging, and Fred Kern, who had been my pedagogy professor at the University of North Texas and was on the team. They just encouraged and supported, and just working with them, I learned so much. And in writing the method, when we would have a need for something, I thought, well, I'll throw my hat in the ring, And then once you get started composing, as you know, you kind of get hooked.
And it's just something that you continue to get better at. And it's just, as you continue to do it, it kind of becomes a passion. And look at where it has led you to such amazing compositions that so many students love to play. What a wonderful story. I love that. So as I was sight reading through your compositions last night, I loved playing them. It was so much fun. But I noticed that although they're really varied and there's lots of different styles in there's certain threads that kind of make them uniquely yours, that there's a harmonic vocabulary that you use in your pieces that really is very distinctive, and I love it. It's really cool. How do you kind of develop that distinct sound, that distinct characteristic that makes your music yours?
Well, the influences, I think, when you're younger, play into it. I've always had a love for jazz. And I played in jazz band in high school and in college. And then for 10 years, I played 3 nights a week at a restaurant, just making my own arrangements, dinner music. And I think a lot of that filters into the harmonic vocabulary that I use, in my music. And a lot of times, for example, the Impressions of New York, I didn't sit down intending to write a jazz piece. But I realized once the piece was written that all 3 movements had jazz elements. And so, it has the subtitle, Jazz Sonatina. So I think that influences it, and really just playing by ear. I don't think often about, what kind of chord progression am I going to use. I don't think about it theoretically. It just kind of happens organically.
Tell us a little bit more about your creative process. When you go to compose music, what does that look like? How do you usually approach that?
Well, I first just kind of sit down at the piano and just fool around. You never know. And some days something comes of it, and other days, forget it. But I think you have to start there. And, the other thing is occasionally, just when you're doing mundane tasks like driving down the road, a melody will kind of run through my head and, at a stoplight. And then I'll think, oh my gosh, okay, as soon as I get to the destination, I stop. I always carry pencil and paper, and I'll jot down just enough of it so that I'll remember it and follow up at home. Honestly, like when you're in the shower, sometimes a musical idea will come to you, the craziest times. And what I have learned is at least in my case, you better write it down or record it. Even if it's in very rough form, it doesn't matter. And occasionally I will have something like that, and go back to it years later. I'll be flipping through a notebook and find an idea that I'd forgotten about. And it's like, well, this might have something to it. And then, you create a piece out of it.
That is really excellent. I love how you are open and aware of all of these little moments of creativity, but then you have a way to preserve them, whether it's through recording or writing something down, and a way to go back to it later. That is just awesome. Where do you seek inspiration for your compositions?
I would have to say maybe the number one type of inspiration I have is travel, visiting other places. For example, in 2019, right before the pandemic hit, my husband Richard and I took a glorious vacation in Spain. And we went to about 6 major towns and cities in Spain. And, just the sounds, the smells, the spices in the air, when you'd walk for a market, the street musicians that you would see, the flamenco dancing, I came home with all of that swirling around in my head, and I sat down and wrote the book Impresiones de España with one piece for each city that we visited, to just put down how that place impressed me, and I just wanted to share it with other people, and especially at the time because, we got into that 2 or 3 year period where nobody could travel. And I thought, well, at least through music, students can kind of go to Spain and get a taste of it, even if, they can't take a vacation.
You talked a little bit about being connected with Hal Leonard and working on the method books. How did you connect with Hal Leonard? How did you get connected with them?
Oh, sheer luck. You've always heard about being in the right place at the right time. And I really think that's what happened for me. My husband was the associate director of the National Piano Teachers Institute that was held at SMU every July literally for decades. And Barbara Crater from Hal Leonard, she was working at Hal Leonard at the time, came down and she was one of the clinicians. And like I mentioned before, I studied with Fred Kern at UNT, and Barbara and Fred had gone to school together way back when and were really close friends and colleagues. And Richard and I, at the conference, would always do a session on new music. And Barbara heard us, and I think she, liked what we did. And so, anyway, through Fred and Barbara, really that's how I got connected with Hal Leonard. So, I thank my lucky stars all the time for that. It was a gift.
That's really cool. But I noticed that behind the luck and the perhaps good fortune that you had there, you had also laid the groundwork for some of those things happening, that you already had some relationships because of where you went to school through your husband. You were putting yourself out there. You were at a conference and you were visible. And so I really have this belief that success sort of attracts more success, that when you are someone who is visible, you are highly skilled as you were at that time, that you have those connections, that more things tend to happen for us. So as yes, it is a really fortunate thing, and there was some good fortune that was there. I also think that you had really laid the groundwork and set yourself up to achieve that success, that very well-deserved success. How cool is that? That's really
well,
neat.
And that's a lesson for everybody, get out in the mix, right?
Absolutely. And hopefully good things will happen. That is great. So what advice would you have for aspiring young composers who are hoping to emulate your success?
Well, I do quite a bit of judging of original compositions, and I've done it on the local level, the state, and the national level. And some of these kids absolutely will blow you away. I was judging a composition just a couple months ago, a 5th grader. And I finished playing through that piano solo, and I thought, I'd give anything to write a piece like that. So the talent is there. And I think, obviously, teachers are out there teaching composition. They're incorporating it in their lessons. And, it's just a wonderful thing. These kids just have brilliant ideas. And, so I think just to enter competitions, it is the best way. Just keep plugging away at it. That's exactly what I did. And, it will come to you in time.
That is excellent advice. What tips do you have for time management? We're all so busy these days, and especially students who are running off to a million after-school activities and sports and everything. How do you carve out time to compose?
Well, it's interesting because obviously composing is a creative act. So, you have to have the inspiration, you have to have the idea, but you also have to have time just to sit down and play at the piano, to get these ideas. So, I'm not the type of person who sets aside an hour a day to compose. And I appreciate people who do that. I mean, I think that's a wonderful thing. But for me, it comes a little bit more in spurts, but once you get the idea, usually the bug has bitten you at that point. And it's like, you can't wait to flesh it out and go through that process. And, I think the other thing is that sometimes it's just a bad day. You're just not going to get a whole lot accomplished, and that's okay too. You have to accept that every day is going to be different, and you just keep working. And I think the gratification, once you do get the piece finished and you're proud of the work and you get to share it with other people, then, that spurs you on to do more.
What are some of the biggest challenges that you feel composers are facing today?
I started composing in the 1990s, and for, 20 years or so, it was really pretty easy to get things published. I mean, I would just send things in and boom, all of a sudden they would have a cover and then they would be out. And, it's a different world now in publishing. You can still get published, but in educational piano, at least, it's not the same. So I have a website now, monarejino.com, and I have a few pieces on there that are self-published, because I have not been able to get them published any other way at this point. So, they're available for digital download. And so what I can't get published now just goes onto my website, and I have recordings of the pieces. And, that's the way that at least that I'm going to handle it for the near future.
Excellent. We'll make sure we link your website in the description of this video. But I also think that that's a really, really cool thing. What are some of the advantages and disadvantages, and what are some of the challenges of starting your own publishing company and self-publishing?
Well, thank goodness my husband is a technical person. So he designed the website, set it all up, and I'm so grateful. And then when questions come up from people who, are trying to access the music or whatever, he's there to handle all of that. But there is some effort that's required, to keep that going. But it's kind of cool. You do have control over it, and I can put as much on there as I want or as little, So I guess there are advantages and disadvantages either way.
Throughout the course of our conversation here, you've mentioned doing multiple different things and that you have a very multifaceted career. How do you feel about doing different things and not just making a living as a composer or just as a music educator or just as a clinician?
Well, now, if you think about the musicians that do you know a single musician who does only one thing? I think we all wear a lot of different hats. For me, composing, arranging, teaching is number one. On your income tax form, you have to put, what is your occupation? So I've always put piano teacher because that's really what I do the most of. But, I do a lot of accompanying, play for weddings, memorial services, dinner music, parties. There's just myriad things that we all do. And I think when you are involved in these different areas, it makes you better at everything. Every aspect that you do, maybe if you do ensemble work, obviously that's going to make you a better player. I encourage people to really not just keep a narrow path, but to really branch out, try a lot of different things in music.
That is excellent advice and a great perspective on all of those things that you do. How cool. So what do you hope to be known for?
I think my legacy twofold, of the hundreds and hundreds of students that I have taught and continue to teach over the past, do I dare say 40 plus years? Scary. I hope that I have given them, instilled a love of music and something that they can continue, hopefully, for their whole life, at least on some level. And also, through composing and arranging, I would love to leave, something behind, something that will outlive me, that will hopefully give students joy and something that they can share with others and kind of just keep it going.
I love that. What a cool thing. Is there any last bits of wisdom you want to leave us with?
Well, I would just say that, music is for life. It's a lifetime pursuit, and for families who are tuned in like mine, to give their children that opportunity is just the greatest gift, and it's just the gift that keeps on giving.
That is wonderful. Those are great words to live by. Thank you so much for being here today. My guest has been composer and music educator Mona Rejino. Thank you so much for sharing with us today.
Thank you, Sam. I appreciate the opportunity.